afternoon to In-House Counsel and in-house legal professionals from all across North America and the world. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunchtime with us. And special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Thomson Reuters, and our fantastic presenters today, Ryan Groff, Jason Bess, and Matt Hitchcock, who are going to teach us or tell us about GenAI use cases for in-house counsel. This is our 60th event of the year, and I'm wondering, are you here for the first time or have you tuned in to an IHC webinar before? Looks like we have a really fresh audience to In-House Connect. About 42% are new, so welcome. Welcome everybody here for the first time, and welcome back to our returning attendees. Let's get to today's event, GenAI use cases for in-house counsel. I'm thrilled to turn things over to our moderator extraordinaire, Ryan Groff. Ryan, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Shai, thanks so much. Good to be with you all. I've been to a few In-House Connect events over the last 2 years, and it's good to be back. So again, grateful to Shai and your whole team for having us here today. What we're going to be discussing is obviously the title, GenAI, use cases for in-house counsel, but we're also going to be having a parallel conversation, a sort of dialectic with the 2024 Generative AI and Professional Services report from Thomson Reuters. So Jason, Matt, and I have looked that over, so we'll be using that as part of our commentary today as well. So on that note, just jumping right in, our panelists, we have Jason Bess, who is VP and General Counsel at Sellmark. Jason actively provides cross-functional advice and counsel on a wide range of legal, regulatory, and commercial matters as a matter of leadership on his team. He's directly involved in complex business transactions, including negotiation of critical contracts, legal affairs of the organization, and conflict resolution. Jason, great to have you with us.
Ryan, thanks for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. A special hello to all the Texans on the call. Great to have you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jason. And we also have Matt Hitchcock, who is Associate General Counsel at Vault Insurance. Matt is an experienced corporate lawyer with a demonstrated history of working in insurance and also legal support services as well. Matt is skilled in legal writing, corporate law, regulatory compliance, employment law, privacy law, contract negotiation, and civil litigation. He has a passion for leadership through service to others, networking, and helping people really find the solutions and to the obstacles that they're encountering in their work and in their life. So Matt, really good to have you with us today as well.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Great to be here, and so great to see so many people on the call today.
Yeah, that's well said. My name is Ryan. I'm a lawyer in Massachusetts, a lecturer on law at New England Law Boston, senior solutions consultant here at Thomson Reuters, and I was a member of the team at Casetext that launched Co-Counsel about a year ago. So it's an absolute privilege to be part of this particular event. So jumping right in, briefly, we've chosen to organize our discussion around 4 main topics as we discuss generative AI use cases for in-house counsel. So just briefly, first, we'd like to start by answering the question, what is it? What is GenAI today for in-house lawyers? Second, we'll consider why this technology matters to this particular part of the legal community. Third, we'd like to consider some risks associated with GenAI. And then finally, we'd like to take a few moments at the end to get out our crystal balls of sorts and look into the future and say, well, what's next? What might be coming next for this particular technology and maybe additional technologies? So jumping right in, what is it? I have a few comments here for this. Most of the times I'll keep things brief, but overall, when we refer to GenAI, when we refer to this technology today, we're often referring to something called large language models, or LLMs, not the advanced legal degree, but a kind of AI technology. But it's important to know that this kind of AI, it's been around for a long time. Today's versions are simply much more sophisticated. Specifically, today's AI, it can create novel, human-like content. These AI tools are pre-trained, so they come ready to work. If you've used other AI models in the past, you may have the experience of sort of carving off a subset, training a little bit, seeing how it works. We're sort of in new territory. The AI comes pre-trained now. These tools can work faster and more accurately than other kinds of large language models, the ones available today, and they are multimodal. And that's a fancy term of simply meaning they can process different kinds of information. That could be text, it could be images, it could be video, it could be audio. And finally, this kind of AI technology, it can actually be deployed in a variety of applications. So from general uses, maybe a general use chatbot that's free online, to a very specifically developed honed tool that you might pay for and use for a specific profession. So some of those applications are for general use. They immediately stream right sounding answers based on the prompt. This technology can also be used to create another kind of use, which is maybe general use, but with some tether to a general source of information like the internet. So maybe you've used AI that has that kind of general tether. But then there's also what we described as specific use tools that deliver answers that professionals would expect for a particular discipline or profession. So for example, when GenAI is used in this kind of application, the tools will be able to work at a professional level scale. They'll be able to take more than 10 documents at a time, for example, and maybe even process up to a few 100,000 at a time. And these tools, they'll also be able to show you their work. Meaning if you ask the tool to show you their citations, tell me the exact page where you got that fact from in that database of a few 100,000 documents, or tell me which exact real case did you get that answer from for legal research, right? So that's what we mean by that last kind of AI. It's specifically developed for a specific professional use. So overall, Thomson Reuters report, the 2024 Generative AI and Professional Services report, it found that, quote, the sentiment surrounding Gen AI remains hesitance that is quickly followed by optimism and excitement. So first question for Jason and Matt, I wonder if you could kick us off by sharing just a few thoughts about how you've seen AI used historically, maybe over the last several years, but then bring us up to the present. What kinds of AI do you see being used or considered by in-house counsel today? And Jason, we'll start off with you and we'll go back and forth throughout our time today.
Sure. I think that's a great overview of generative AI. I think it's important for the audience here because I think the last number I saw was almost 300 people. The generative AI is critical, but if we're talking about in-house professionals and whether you're an attorney or not, I think it's real quick, and I promise on a long sidebar, make sure that you understand the different types of AI that is out there. So you have the generative AI, which Ryan just described, which is our main focus today. Predictive AI exists. It's analyzing patterns and uses information to make forecasts and predictions. So supply chain, healthcare, retail marketing, you'll see it in those spaces. Machine learning gives the computers the ability to learn without explicitly being programmed. So you see kind of computer science mixed with statistics in that scenario. So think of like a linear regression test. So your finance and treasury teams, your accounting teams. And then there's like your deep learning ones that you hear about in the news a lot. So that's these algorithms mixed with kind of brain-like thinking is the best way to say it. I think that's the dumbest way for me to say it. But an example of that is, it's like Tesla using an algorithm to recognize a stop sign. And so I think it's important that in-house understands, especially attorneys, to understand the different types of AI, not only for themselves in the legal department, but those ancillary departments that you're going to work with. But Ryan, answering your question directly, in the past, specifically pre-chat GPT days, I would get pitches from companies all the time. I'd get demos and they would have, contract drafting or review services. And you'd go through this demo. And in most instances, I didn't see AI like we understand it today. It always looked like a fancy macro. If anyone remembers programming macros in the early days of Word, I think if you're in Excel, you probably still do. But it just seemed like a fancy macro. There was a lot of gaps in the language that didn't match a prompt. Like, if it was looking for a force majeure clause, if it didn't say force majeure, it likely wasn't going to be discovered. And then there was a gap between the four corners of the agreement, right? What the actual words were versus what the implication was. Today, I think I'm getting a lot of pitches. I'm hearing from my peers and I'm experiencing a lot of generative AI aimed at specific use cases. The biggest pitch that I'm seeing is, and I think a lot of the peers I'm talking to are research applications, research uses, faster reviews of contracts or redlining. I think we'll talk about that a little bit more, hopefully. And then I see the big one is e-discovery. And I haven't dealt with e-discovery products that much. I know others have. I think we'll get some benefits and we'll talk about concerns about each of those pieces, but I see a lot of those specific use applications being plugged today.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jason. Matt, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in here as well, both to the question,
Absolutely.
but your general reflections here as well on what it is.
Yeah, Jason, I think that was a really great summation of the different types of AI that we're seeing and have seen over the last, say, 60 plus years actually of AI. given that my insurance background and, just a quick note, given, we're all attorneys here, I have to say that I'm not speaking on behalf of Vault. We are a heavily regulated insurance carrier, personal line space. So I'm not speaking on behalf of what Vault's doing, just generally what I've seen and what I'm experiencing. But I have seen, to Jason's point, predictive modeling being used, especially in the insurance space. And I'm interested to see how, because AI historically, we didn't have the access to the compute power to be able to run these algorithms. They existed, but you would need just so much hardware to do it. The normal organization couldn't do it. Some insurance carriers were able to, they had those resources, but now we're just seeing with the cloud, so much, it's just accessible to people. It's been democratized. And we definitely saw that, how much things have changed since OpenAI made ChatGPT really accessible to the masses. Things I've seen, Jason spoke some about the CLMs. I've used them throughout my career. I cut my teeth starting out as an in-house attorney implementing a CLM, and still doing it today. It seems just wherever I go, it's a necessary tool. And that's where I really want to focus. My point is that this is a tool. AI is a tool in your toolkit. And like Jason said, there's different types. So you got different tools. Do you need a chainsaw? Do you need a hammer? What kind of AI tool do you need? And I've just on one last note, the ways I'm seeing and wanting to leverage it is I'm seeing improvement in the CLMs. I actually am. Having started out doing CLM implementations back in 2009, the very nascent stage of that software industry, to where it is today. It's really amazing. And really just to see how much it's evolved in the last year, really. To
Matt,
where
I think I just heard a bunch of people give a sigh of relief hearing CLMs are improving.
I promise you, I was
heard it
one
over
of the
the mutes.
doubters. I was a very, if you've seen me at conferences and we've met before, you probably know I'm a bit of a pessimist when it came to AI's capability, especially, I think you alluded to this, Jason, a lot of vendors historically, they just would slap AI in their features and think it's good enough. But I saw my vendor, I'm not going to say here, public forum, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to talk with you. I've seen my vendor, and they announced we have a new AI, we've updated it, and it's improved to the point where it doesn't have to say termination date or force majeure. It's creepy enough, smart enough to read through it and see, okay, this is where the dates line up, and it's saying 45 dates from this event, and it's marking it pretty well now. So that's the last point, and I'll not go on another tangent, I promise, is I'm really looking to leverage AI to look into my data. I want to know what I've done historically, because I know many of us, we get asked similar legal questions over the years that we're at an organization. So I think having something like a co-pilot or an AI that sits on, your records and can search through it and summarize your data, what you've done before, is going to speed us up. It's going to be a great tool for the future.
Excellent insights. And Jason, Matt, thank you so much again for sharing your experience there. Well, as promised, we want to continue on with our topics. So having taken a moment to just talk about what it is, where we've seen it at use in the present, I think it helps to have some of that historical perspective, some definitions, some high-level initial uses in front of us, especially as we pivot now to think about why it matters. Like, why is this technology in the sea of other technologies that we all use from day to day? Why does this technology grab our attention? And just to frame this part of the discussion, I'd just like to share a few data points that capture what professionals are expecting from GenAI. So from the research, from the report that we mentioned earlier from Thomson Reuters, right there on the screen, you can see them. I'll just take a second to read down through them. 44% of respondents were hopeful or excited about GenAI's introduction into their industry, including legal, tax and accounting, and risk and fraud. We also see that 81% said GenAI can be applied to their work. 23% of the organizations were already using GenAI, or they had active plans to begin doing so. So next question, I'll keep things pretty simple, Matt, and then Jason, we'll switch the order this time. Why does this matter? Whether we're interacting with these stats or not, your thoughts, why this technology sort of captivates our attention. Matt?
I think it captivates our attention. I don't know, for me personally, for many reasons, good and bad. I always try to, we're attorneys, try to look at both sides of the coin. I think it captivates us, just the potential here. I know I've heard people say, think of how the internet has impacted and changed the legal industry, the providing legal services to your company or to the public, or even in a government role. The internet changed that to a huge degree. I remember when I many moons ago started law school, and it was sort of at that shift between you had to go to the law library and now everything's available online. And I think we're kind of at that next point, that next evolution of our industry. And I've heard people say, and you take it with a grain of salt, that this has the potential to have that impact times 100. Think of how much the internet has changed the legal practice. Well, multiply that times 100 is what AI can get us. So I think that's amazing, and people are thrilled about that. But also, is that going to take my job? Am I going to be replaced by AI? I think there's a lot of that concern. And even if I feel confident myself, those of us that learn how to use these tools, you don't want to hire a carpenter that doesn't know how to use their tools. So these are going to become the tools of our craft. And I understand those that are hesitant, but I really encourage you to start at least trying this out at on a personal level if you're not comfortable using it in the workplace yet, because there's going to become a point where you have to. And I think that's the concern is people don't want to be forced to do something new.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think many on the call might remember times where you stood in line to use a terminal at the library to do your legal research, rather than today, folks have it easy, right? You just log in from anywhere with an internet connection. You get access to a variety of legal research databases. A super big shift. And even to just thinking about who used a keyboard 50 or 100 years ago, typically that was done maybe by someone assisting you, whereas now it would be weird. Everybody has their own keyboard, right? So yeah, I think some really interesting shifts. Matt, thanks so much for kicking us off. Jason, any thoughts here? Why does this technology matter?
We're very, very early in this technology. I mean, it is the infancy. And so when I see these numbers, 44% being hopeful, 81% believing it can be applied to their work, 23% or so already using it, and then 35, which is a good healthy number to be hesitant. That actually makes me really excited. I think these are really good indicators. ChatGPT, I don't know if anyone remembers, it feels like it's been with us forever, but it was only launched to the public in November of 2022, which is insane. And so your Google feed has probably been just littered with all of the news and the different applications related to just AI as a whole. So this is just brand new technology. And Matt, kind of talked about, pre-internet research, where we are today. I think Matt's 100% on the money when you follow the news about where we're going with AI. And of course, there's kind of an asterisk there. We don't know how much it'll be slowed down by regulations. EU is passing some rules. US is thinking about doing something. They'll do that a little too late. But, we'll see where all this goes. But it's very early technology. So I see these early adopters and I see people excited about it to work with new technology. I think what we need to appreciate is the data points here, at least I think that's correct. The data points here aren't just for legal. This is across different industries. And so I think that needs to be kept in the back of our heads when we're looking and analyzing these numbers. But I think AI is coming at us extremely quickly, understanding how it's being used, how it's being applied to specific tasks, what it's assisting in, what the outputs are, what they consist of. I think all of that is critical, especially for in-house counsel. Generally speaking, depending on your role within the legal organization, you're going to be reviewing and negotiating those contracts, understanding how that technology works, understanding how it's used when you're reviewing those terms is a must. I don't think you can take a shortcut there. So that intersection for us between law and technology should be top of mind as you're going forward in your career, as you're interacting with AI. You're going to have a say in how these tools are being used throughout your organization, whether it's within legal or whether it's within your other corporate departments. So it's going to be very cross-functional. Legal is going to be top of mind, and if not, they should be. And so I know when ChatGPT was put out publicly, I think within 6 months, myself and other peers were all writing corporate policies on AI use. And I mean, it was a frenzy. And some of it was, I think, looking back in hindsight, you have some of it coming from leadership where it's maybe over restrictive, others not restrictive enough, but you have to adapt, make sure you understand that technology, make sure you're communicating accordingly. And, to Matt's point about being maybe hesitant or afraid of some of that technology, if you're not using it internally, there are a ton of free resources for prompting different AI technologies, so you can experiment with that. I think it's great to experiment with the different technology uses, some of those prompts. And the last thing I'll say on this, just because I know we want to be mindful of time, is take a moment to go read the terms and conditions.
Yeah, Jason, that's a good word. And so many of your reflections, I like what you said earlier too about folks really paying attention to this technology and digging in and seeming to want to know how it works and taking an interest. I don't want to offer any specific stats here. I don't have any sort of secret knowledge, but it seems like this technology is something that is really attracting attention from the legal community, maybe a little different than other technologies. Sometimes it's taken legal maybe some time to adapt. So I think that's a really helpful observation, that we're sort of digging in, but how do we dig in, right? Understanding those agreements, understanding those terms. As cloud applications, some of it's very similar to work we've already done, right? We should already be used to evaluating a cloud application, third-party processing agreements, right? Some of that's kind of standard. We should have been experienced. We have experience doing that for about the last decade or two, but some of it's new, right? Does the model train off your data? Those sorts of things. I know we have a discussion of risk a little bit later, but we had a question right here that I wanted to maybe bring up during this part of the conversation. Before we head into our first poll, I'm just making sure I got it here. We have a question from Jennifer. Can someone address getting a comfort level regarding attorney-client privilege, confidentiality in a large language models, which seem they must be learning from all the info that we put in. So maybe off of that last comment, Jason, like folks should be digging into this stuff. Concerns, just immediate reaction to how folks should navigate those particular questions about attorney-client privilege and confidentiality?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It should be top of mind for every attorney, and not only every attorney, but other users of AI cross-functionally, right? Whether it's finance or whomever. But I think the question is answered by understanding whether you have an open or closed AI model and how it's trained. And so I would think it was Jennifer, I would encourage you to look at the difference between open and closed models and how they're trained. Specifically, the idea that open is what you're seeing publicly, where it's trained on all the input that any user is utilizing, that its developers put in. And then there's closed models, and I'm not plugging Thomson Reuters solution, but you look at the Thomson Reuters solution, I believe that's a closed model. So all of that training there is based on case law, secondary sources. It's based on what they've input. And then I believe, and I'm 99% sure this is the case, that what you're inputting there is actually not retained by the AI model. So it's not learning off of what you input. And so there's two things there, the closed piece, and then the earlier comment, looking at terms and conditions, making sure that what you interpret as closed and what they're actually utilizing in those terms and conditions for use and input. Feedback is one thing, but what am I inputting? If I'm putting in, oh, Sellmark has this issue, what are the legal risk or what are the regulations inputting? Is that being kept, right? And you can look at the term and conditions and find out, but the easiest place to start is say, is this open or closed?
Excellent. Thanks, Jason. Matt, don't want to cut you off. Did you want in here just for a second?
I dropped a link. I just want to keep it brief because I know time. Dropped a link to a Florida proposed advisory opinion on regarding lawyers' use of generative AI. I think that's a great place to start to read for those that are in the audience. Just say that Florida has a technology ethics requirement. I don't know which other states may have that requirement, but here in Florida, I view it as an ethical obligation to my organization that I work for, my client as an in-house counsel. I have one client, really. My ethical obligation to them to understand this technology, because whether I'm comfortable using it in the office, it's going to be used by my vendors. And one of the things I feel we have to watch out for is services we already have, where vendors are looking to add AI into their services to stay competitive, stay out there, stay at the top. So whether you plan to use it or not, it's coming.
Yeah, I really
Matt,
like
that last piece is critical. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jason. Yeah, no,
that last piece is critical.
Yeah.
Understanding how, even if it's not, like, you have existing vendors today, existing tools, they've upgraded next year's model, yet next year's solution now has AI. What are we doing with that? What are they doing with that data? What are we allowing them to do by signing that contract? So again, terms and conditions, understanding that cross-functional between legal obligations, your regulatory environment, and technology, it is here.
Yeah, and at a time of really technological excitement, you have that cascading effect, right, through lots of different layers of your organization. Really appreciate this part of the conversation. I will just say, as someone that works at a company that offers AI, there's lots of different kinds of AI out there. There's lots of different ways you can use models, just the way Jason was explaining. So yeah, dig into those. They're not all the same, but even free versions off the shelf, make sure to use those settings. Use your privacy settings to your advantage. Make sure to look exactly what the settings are. Even free versions of these applications allow you to turn off training, for example. So just make sure you're doing even that basic level of review. Shai, let's go to that poll question. All right, so here we have a poll question. How would you use GenAI for in-house work? Shai, I don't want to cut you off. Feel free to jump in too.
Yeah, no problem. We have our poll up. Thank you everybody for participating in the chat.
I wanted to note, someone clarified for me. Thank you, Lori. I grabbed very quickly the link for the proposed Florida order, and it's been put into place now, so it's no longer proposed. So those Florida attorneys, make sure you're keeping aware of this and following your ethical obligations.
Awesome. So just looking at the poll, it looks like contract review is our leader with 76%, followed by contract drafting, 70%, and then followed by research, and then document review and e-discovery. Looks like M&A due diligence and outside counsel and spend management would be next. There are a couple of people who said other. There are a couple of people who said not at all. Please let us know why you feel that way and what the other use cases are. I feel like this is an exhaustive list. And it's interesting that people, more people would use this for contract review rather than contract drafting. I wonder what the distinction is there. Feels like they're all part of the same topic. Over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks so much. Matt, Jason, just want to go to you for a few seconds. Any immediate reaction to these polls? Why people would be using it for different uses here?
I'm a little bit surprised to see the M&A due diligence so low.
Okay.
That's surprising to me. But contract review and drafting, that's what I would expect. How about you, Jason?
I actually kind of understand why M&A is a little low. I think there's, I'll touch on that later, I guess. I can see why people are like, maybe. I think it should be used more there for sure. Outside counsel and spend was one that shocked me being so low because I want my legal bills to be lower. And so if you're spending time research and drafting, if it took you 3 hours, and also within that due diligence period, and that you're doing your due diligence working with outside counsel, I want to see my bills lower. You used the analogy earlier, Matt, about pre-internet days and how we used to do research, what we're doing now. We should see that kind of trickle down into outside counsel spend. If I'm seeing an hour on something, it better be something crazy.
Yeah, I definitely have seen that in some of the surveys I've seen where those that responded, some expect to see the cost go down, but some are not quite sure because of the new technology and the overhead there.
Sure.
All right, excellent. Thanks for that quick unscripted way in here. That's great. So let's take a second here. We have another bit of use cases here on our screen. This gets much more detailed than what we offered in that poll, but just digging in here a little bit, here's an overview of some top GenAI uses that we found in our research here at Thomson Reuters. Notice the grid includes uses across various professional scenarios. We mentioned these at the beginning. Jason, I think you referenced them too. It's law firms, corporate, tax and accounting, government agencies, and courts. We include all of these because in-house lawyers and other legal professionals, they can interact foreseeably with many different kinds of organizations or be at many different kinds of organizations. So Jason and Matt, I guess from the perspective of in-house counsel, what comes to mind to you as you review these use cases? Maybe some follow-up questions, which uses seem ready-made for today's in-house work, or maybe how might these use cases change the total work that's completed by an in-house team, not just the individual, maybe lawyer or other legal professional. But I'll stop there. Maybe there's other questions that come to mind for you, and feel free to share those as well. But I'll stop. Jason, we'll go back to you to start things off for this one.
Honestly, the word omnipresent comes to mind when I see all this. It's certainly everywhere. But I mean, realistically, all of these at some point are, going to be impacting these different groups. I think in some industries and in some use cases, there's maybe some industry gatekeeping or general apprehension of adoption by leadership or the industry as a whole. So some of these I think are further behind than others. and over time will actually speed up. I mean, just a quick side note on the M&A due diligence, the reason I wasn't surprised on that is, the data rooms, a lot of those have their own terms. There's restrictions on use, and then there's, well, how is this going to be uploaded? And then there's the NDAs that parties are signing and placing in restrictive covenants on how that can be used. And so if I'm a seller and maybe I'm not as transparent as I want to be, who knows, right? Like, there could be reasons why people say, I don't want you putting this into an AI tool for whatever their reason is. And so I think M&A will actually struggle a little bit in quicker adoption. That's my personal opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it speeds up. But again, I think so there's some industry gatekeeping and, but with all that said, I hate to say anything is ready-made, so to speak. We'll talk about some areas to be cautious in, but I think e-discovery for sure. I think that's likely the closest. You have AI shifting through information at a quicker pace. It's gathering more relevant information. I think that saves a ton of times on those investigations when you're working with HR or other departments. General contract review, I think, is probably there. I'm not sure about drafting. I do see them as two different issues. And I think a lot of people may disagree on that, not only in the bifurcation, but in terms of how ready-made that is. But I think it's around the corner. I think drafting's around the corner. I do have concerns about that, but identifying, potential risk or ambiguity within a contract is certainly going to help and save time. It'll direct attention to something maybe not so obvious. I'll be curious how this works in practice when we're weighing that against the organization's risk appetite, your general counsel's risk appetite, or the specific deal that you're actually working on. Maybe it's a business critical deal. And that changes how you're analyzing that contract. Something that wasn't important typically is maybe now much more important. I could talk about each of these on this list, but I won't for the sake of time. But I think regardless of the solution, we should see legal departments, and we should expect it to happen, completing more work at a quicker pace. I think that's inevitable, especially as more tools are adopted. And again, ideally, depending on the tool you're using, you're utilizing outside counsel either less, or when you're working with outside counsel, it's in a more narrow focus.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Jason. And lots of questions coming in right now about different use cases and how we might see those being used. So Jason, even while Matt's jumping in here, feel free to look through those. We might just stick here for a little bit and try to engage the chat. But Matt, any initial thoughts, things about this grid of use cases, things that you see really ready-made for today, maybe, but also things that might affect the total work of an entire in-house team? I'll stop there. Other questions, feel free to answer those as well.
Yeah, I think it's those low level routine tasks are where we can really start to see some lift. And then those that were normally doing those 50 NDA reviews a week, since those are generally such a simple contract, generally high volume, low risk, if we can have an AI review those and just flag one or two things each document, and it takes the attorney 15 minutes as opposed to an hour per review, right to where Jason's saying, we are going to increase our speed and the amount of work we're able to do because of these tools. And one area I want to focus on is really the summarization capabilities of these AI tools. I saw just a really great example of that yesterday, where those that use Microsoft may have seen the Copilot features coming online in various tools. And we had a meeting where a very critical teammate wasn't able to be on the call, but we were able to use the Copilot features to transcribe and provide a summary. The very next morning, they reached out and like, this is amazing. I know everything that happened. And so I think that just that summarization capability, but right here on the screen saying, applying that to documents. And again, what I mentioned earlier, and I think that really lays into number 5 as well, is the ability to pull and pull information out of what we have. Because I think a lot of us have so much data, it's overwhelming. So the ability to use these tools to pull insights out of that you can then take action on, we're going to be able to do that faster, and it's going to really help.
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment. I think this AI, at least from my experience working with the technology and sitting alongside lots of corporate and legal teams over the last year, that it really helps with getting folks to the place where they make those decisions. It's not necessarily doing those decisions for them, that lower level work. And if you can find where you need to go, identify the information in the contract, to an sort of to an nth degree faster, that's huge, right? So yeah, really appreciate that kind of framing. I did refer, there's a bunch of good conversations going on in the chat. So Jason, Matt, just wanted to give you a second or two. If there's anything in there, a lot on use cases, anything in there you'd like to reflect on, I certainly want to give you a chance to do so, but also we can move forward if not.
I skimmed it real quick, but when Matt was, I think there was a couple questions. Some of them were kind of related. There was two. One was how is it being used for risk assessments, reporting, those type of items. And I think that was someone from Coca-Cola, which I give a shout out to Coke Zero. I love it, especially if there's a dash of rum in there or a heavy pour. And then there was another one about due diligence being kind of more high risk when it's an M&A activity, which I tend to agree with. I think that's a really good call out. On the risk assessments, and Matt talked about this kind of at the opening of our conversation. I think when we talk about risk assessments, reporting, those type of things, i.e. telling the story of legal, using AI for that, I think it's critical. Depending on where you're at in the organization and how big your voice is, just to be realistic about it, I think telling legal story, what you've completed, what we've done, what our general risk profile looks like, analyzing, contracts to say, we've got X amount of contracts that have this much exposure. How many contracts do we have with unlimited liability? How long is that going to take you to run through? Even if it's just your top 20 clients. And depending on your industry, those contracts could take a long time to go through because it's not necessarily in a vacuum that you're not just necessarily looking at the limitation liability clause, right? There may be a BAA addendum that's attached there and it has a separate cap, depending on how you've written those contracts. So I think it's great for those quick analysis. I think that'll speed up in the future. And I think it's really great to show legal's KPIs, what we've done, how we've done it, what that means to the organization. A lot of companies view, for better or for worse, they view legal as a cost center. I don't think that's a secret. And so I think when you're able to tell a story that shows where you're saving costs, saving time, and adding value, that's good for you.
Yeah, that's great. Jason, thanks for just kind of sharing off the top of your head there. I think that's really helpful. Matt, anything to add before we jump to our next topic?
I was looking through the chat and just wanted to point out some of the tools I use myself as well that I see there: Claude, ChatGPT, Perplex. I know there's so many else out there. So yeah, if anyone else has some recommendations, I think those are some great ones.
Yeah, excellent. That's a great thread too, and a lot of different kinds of tools there. And tools, ChatGPT came out in the end of 2022, but even just looking at ChatGPT, it itself has changed so much in the last year and a half to going on 2 years now, coming up this fall. So as now, you remember when you first used ChatGPT, you typed in an answer, it would just stream a right sounding answer based on its general pre-training. Now, even the free version can tell you where it got its answers from. So it can cite to a source like Bing Chat has been able to do, like Perplexity has been able to do. So yeah, some really interesting development there, and it's moving faster than we can consider. So we have considered how GenAI can be applied to today's in-house work. We also want to consider the risks associated with that. We've started this conversation at a few points already. Just want to provide a minute of framing comments here. Generally speaking, the ABA's legal ethics requirements assume that lawyers are going to be using technology, and they generally assume that this technology is always going to be changing. So if you consider Rule 11, Comment 8, that's the part of the ABA's guidance that we typically refer to as the requirement for tech competence. So if you read that rule comment, you'll notice that the rule modifies what it means for a lawyer to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill to practice law. The legal knowledge and skill, they're presumed. These already exist, so now you just have to maintain them. And relatedly, law and practice, those are presumed to change, and lawyers must simply, quote, keep abreast of those changes. So this isn't the realm of if things change or if they do, we have to come up with new regulations. No, the rule assumes change. It assumes new technology, so we have to remain aware. So these ethical duties, they might spur in-house teams to consider a range of issues when adopting any new technology, including generative AI technology. So Matt, Jason, help us navigate this terrain from your experience, things you've seen. Again, not necessarily speaking on behalf of your organizations, but from your experience, specifically, what unique challenges might this kind of technology, Gen AI, might it require that in-house teams address? But also what risks are associated with Gen AI that are similar to other cloud technologies, right? We might already be dealing with this stuff. We might have already been dealing with some of these issues with other technologies we use. So kind of tease those apart for us if you can. Matt, we'll start off with you this time.
I think one of the biggest concerns is right there at the second grouping on the top, the potential for inaccurate responses. I think all of us heard most likely about the attorney when ChatGPT first came out, trying to use that tool and it just hallucinated and made up fake information that he then tried to put forward in litigation, and it went very badly for that attorney. So that certainly makes sense. And then the other one that I really want to emphasize is the concern around privacy. And I know it's come up on the call already, concerns around attorney-client privilege. And those are certainly things that people do need to be mindful of and concerned about. Part of the looking at your vendors and vetting your vendors, I think, has to also now include what are your vendors doing with their models? If they are, should you add to your vendor management program a check on, we've looked at, are they getting PII from us? Well, now are they providing AI tools to us? And what are they doing around it? Are they having their AI model third-party tested to ensure that there's not bias or really terrible results coming out of their software? So I'll leave it there and let Jason take over, because I know he has some as well, but definitely some big concerns there, I'd say, at the top.
Yeah, Matt, you took all the fun ones. I think, beyond the ethical considerations that Ryan mentioned, I don't think those should be overlooked. I do think you should look at your local rules and some of the ABA guidance and comments that are out there. It is important. I think it's how we interact with other people in our organizations. I think about new attorneys. This technology is going to be at their fingertips since entering law school. So new attorneys should understand, in my opinion, and I hate to sound like the old man on the front porch, which if any of you know me, that is generally who I am. But in this case, I hate to be the grumpy guy, but it's true. I think new attorneys especially need to understand the fundamentals. Bad habits are formed early. We know how hard it is individually, and when we've trained and mentored new attorneys who are, and not necessarily green attorneys, I mean, new attorneys coming on board to your organization, how hard it is to break what we would consider bad habits. I think if AI tools are being used by new attorneys, depending on the use, I think it should be done with some oversight with a more senior attorney, ensuring that they're properly fact-checking. To Matt's point about hallucinations, there's the New York case where it was a made-up citation, right? But there's also accurate citations, but it's actually being used. So the tool describes the law correctly, but cites a source which actually doesn't support the facts to the claim, right? So that's a different type of hallucination. I think that one's more problematic than the made-up one. The made-up one, you can just click Google, like, oh, is that even a real case? I don't know. But the second one is particularly problematic. So I think the oversight's important, again, depending on use. I think learning to actually, we talked about those use cases on the previous slide, contract drafting, review. I think learning to actually interpret and apply, contractual language is important. That was my cornerstone in the start of my career. Was doing, contract negotiations. So it's always kind of close to my heart and brain. But I think even today, I see, attorneys who have been practicing law for a long time, they still struggle with indemnity, and they struggle with how indemnity relates to warranties and limitations of liability when it's being read holistically. I see attorneys struggle with new technology being brought to the forefront. And so I think when we say, oh, well, where are some of these, similarities? It's when we move to the cloud. I remember very clearly when things were moving to the cloud and people were still calling it a license versus a subscription, right? And then you got this perpetual license. When was the last time you saw a perpetual license to data, right? It just doesn't exist anymore. And so you saw some attorneys, generally, of course, some of you are probably typing now, I still got a perpetual license. Yes, there's some out there, but that's something that's gone in the past. And so understanding where the technology is taking us is critical. I think all the concerns that are listed here are important. Job displacement, I think more concerning than job displacement. I think that's less likely, but I saw this paralegal comment. That's great. I love that. And I think more than job displacement, it's actually going to be, I think, harder for newly graduated attorneys to be getting in the door. I think we're going to be seeing a cooling off in our economy, things like that. It's going to do less with more. And so I think that's kind of where I sit on that. I think, yeah, I'll kind of pause there. The last thing I'll say on this, the last thing about some of these risks is, I think we touched on it earlier, the legal being a cost center for departments. AI is expensive. I haven't really come across, there's free ones, but for something you're looking for your organization, they're relatively expensive, whether it's a CLM or a research tool. I think it's important that especially legal leadership learns how to justify these costs across the board. What time is being saved? Is it reducing outside counsel spend? Some of the same stuff we talked about. Is it reducing headcount, or is it preventing us from having to add headcount? Does it further corporate objective? Does it complement the culture of the organization? I think these are all things you can push on, but the privacy pieces that Matt touched on, all those fun ones that he touched on, all critical. But I won't echo those, so I'll pause there.
Yeah, excellent.
I'm
sorry,
so
Matt.
glad you mentioned the concerns over reliance. I just this week had a conversation with another attorney about that, with being concerned that attorney's direct reports were, as a newer attorney and concerned over just that over reliance and starting out and learning the legal trade with that kind of really becoming a crutch. Again, to kind of look at it as tools, like you when you're using a tool, you know what needs to be accomplished. So if the tool isn't doing the job, you know that it's not working. So you have to have that understanding to understand if the tool got it right or wrong.
Yeah, excellent. And some good conversation going on in the chat, some risks. We have a poll up right now. For those of you interested in participating, some of the risks that you foresee with this technology, or maybe even you've already experienced, feel free to keep participating in that. I would like to take just a few minutes here as our time comes to a close in the next 5 minutes or so. I just want to pick Matt and Jason's brain about, again, maybe looking into that crystal ball a little bit, briefly considering the use cases available today or in the immediate future. We looked at some of the risks and those things, but again, where do you see this technology going? Where are we headed? So what's the next few months look like as folks want to adopt this technology, or maybe as they're planning for the next year or two with their tech stack? Where do you foresee this technology maybe going in the future? Again, nobody here is expecting you to know the future, but just any thoughts from what you've seen so far? Jason, let's start with you as we kick this section off.
I think we see more adoption coming. I think that's inevitable. I think we're going to see more adoption in different ways within legal departments and those cross-functional teams that we work with. I just think that's inevitable. So again, making sure that we're advocating appropriately and that we're understanding risk is critical. Excuse me. What to hope for? I mean, I don't know. I worry about future attorneys like we talked about. I worry about work product, the ability to put their lawyer hat on in the future. I want outside counsel costs to go down in some capacity, right? I would expect that. So I think if I have hope when I'm looking at this solely from a legal department, is that we have more time on our hands so that we can integrate better with our business counterparts. We could become early partners in deal development and provide counsel early on when your business counterparts are considering X, Y, and Z. So I think ideally it integrates us sooner and legal is seen more as a partner.
Excellent. Matt, as well, thoughts on these questions about what's coming next?
Yeah, I think over the next year or plus, what I mentioned earlier, it's going to be, these tools are going to be put into software we already have contracts for. I think our vendors are going to largely be adding these as value add, whether they want to sell you a new module or they just add it in. So it's something we're really going to have to be cognizant of and I think add to our vendor assessment, risk assessment practices as in-house professionals, if that's an area that you're over. Certainly, I think as far as the risk concern about how the future of work, how it's going to impact things, if those that are not able to be upskilled to use these tools, how is that going to affect society on a larger basis, going outside the legal department? But, that last one there on the list, I think that on the bottom right, the Skynet, that's our back of our thoughts are always that concern of, are we playing with fire here? Is this, are we bringing about our own destruction, whether that be socially or just it replaces us? And we, I think to Jason's point a couple of minutes ago, newer attorneys are going to struggle because if you can get an AI to do what a new attorney can do, then why wouldn't you just use the AI if it's a cheaper, more regular, reliable option? Doesn't get sick, doesn't need PTO. So you're going to have to skill yourself in other ways and bring something else to the table.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, I think just as working with this technology, it's a very different kind of technology. I'm not learning how to use it. I'm more kind of getting to know it. And there's kind of a component where we have to work together for a little bit to understand each other, even though the other person I'm talking about is a machine. So yeah, it's a really interesting time. Well, I am inclined to cap things there. We have a bunch of good conversations still going on in the chat. Jai, I'd like to make sure we honor in the last minute the best we can to your team here. Any final questions that we can work through? We have another poll. If anybody's interested in co-counsel, please feel free to let us know. We'll be happy to reach out. But again, Shai and all the team at In-House, and I thank you so much for having us today. And Jason and Matt, all of you, please join me in thanking them for their time today.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you, Jason, Matt, and Ryan for a wonderful program. Thank you, Thomson Reuters, for sponsoring today's program. So a couple of things. I'd love to, learn more about co-counsel, if you wouldn't mind telling us more. The link to the Thomson Reuters report, there was a number of stats cited from it. I'm going to share the link as well. So I just want to raise awareness there. Definitely download it. It's full of interesting tidbits. But Ryan, would you mind telling us 30 seconds about co-counsel? And then there was a lot of comments, questions in the chat. Would love to, kind of see if there's any other comments or questions you want to answer after that.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. Yeah, happy to give the 35,000 foot flyby. Co-counsel started as what we call an AI legal assistant in March of 2023. We were working with OpenAI closely for the last 6 months up to that launch date, and we provided that product as a legal assistant. This is something that can be used to very quickly handle what we would call substantive legal tasks. So anything from redlining contracts based on your preferred terms or favorite policies, to looking through large databases of a few 100,000 files, maybe an internal bank of contracts to find trusted provisions that you've used in the past to help with a current drafting scenario, for example. But you can sort of think of any large data set that you might be using in your work. Reviewing documents, summarizing documents, actually one of the most common uses of our tool that came up during today's topic. Sort of a simple thing, but being able to quickly summarize a long, complicated piece of legal jargon and quickly get to the point allows us to then move forward. So lots of different capabilities, we call them skills, that co-counsel has. So yeah, if anybody's interested in seeing how that can work for you, we do offer free trials for lawyers and other legal professionals. So just like we ended a moment or two ago, sometimes the best way to work with this technology is just to kind of get in there and experience it for yourself. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, don't hesitate to click yes on the poll, and we'll make sure to reach out. Yeah, I don't have any other comments on any existing conversations in the chat, but Matt and Jason, I certainly want to defer to you if there's anything there that you'd like to pick up. I certainly want to make sure we have time to do so.
Just wanted to say thanks to Shai and thanks Ryan and Jason. I really enjoyed this and look forward to doing it again sometime.
I had a great time. I'm glad. I thought a lot of the dialogue and the Q&A here was great. I wish we could answer, all of them. I think, and a lot of people here are super knowledgeable, sharing links. I think it's great. I think this type of formatting, Shai, thanks to, this here is great for people to connect and share knowledge. I think it's just a great format to do so.
Shai, I have to say it again, every time I come to one of these events, it's always an engaging experience. I haven't been to a community quite like it. So really jealous of this community and so grateful you have it. Thank you for having us. And again, Jason, Matt, really, really great to be with you all today as well. All right, everyone, have a great day.